Judith. Nikki G, you're hit record. Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Monday's Insights and Innovations. And we are almost at the end of the year. I think my brain's almost fried. This is the second last one, I think, for the end of the year. Super excited. We've got the IMAA in there tomorrow as well, and we've got one in on Monday. But today we have our very, very good friends at Mamamia. There are not many brands that I see so much love around than Mamamia. I have witnessed some things in my time in your offices around how much our members love you guys. It is absolutely ridiculous, and we don't see that with any other brand. So we have got two of their rock stars. We've got Kate Baldwin and Danny Wright joining us. Kate is the head of independence, and Danny is in charge of strategy, the national strategy director. And they're going to be talking the power of parasocial and the relationship with brands. And I am as intrigued as probably as everyone else is around what is parasocial. And I got it horribly wrong while we were setting up. And I want to know more about it. So over to you guys.
Thank you so much, Sam. So before I hand over to Danny, here's our agenda for today. So Danny's going to be taking you three key chapters. The first one being the importance of humanity in an age of AI. We're going to follow by the power of parasocial relationships, and then finish off with the power of the Mamamia network.
No, it's okay now. I just opened these.
So from here, I'd love to hand over to Danny to kick off.
All right. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to be taking you through
that's in charge of it.
I might need to put Sam on.
I'm just
Sam on mute. Can you go on mute, Sam?
So sorry.
As much as that's not distracting. All right, cool. So we're going to kick off. So I'm going to go through the importance of humanity in the age of AI. So there's a lot going on when it comes to AI. I think we're all users of AI, I would imagine. What I found really interesting when I was digging into this topic is just how prolific the adoption of AI is, particularly generative AI tools. So that would be your likes of ChatGPT or Perplexity. Where it's really interesting, though, is that it's actually more highly adopted, highly penetrated in regional areas, as opposed to metro, which I think runs slightly counter to what expectations might be. But I think when you think of Gen AI through the lens of access and the ability, to access information and the dissemination of that information, you can see, I guess, some of the reasons why. So the application of AI is now 50%. 50% of all Australians, 1 in 2 Australians, are using a Gen AI tool, and obviously this is only continuing to increase. And then you think about the implications of that for brands, it's completely changing the landscape. So the game of demand management, the rules have completely shifted, and where we saw, so much focus over the last 5 years in the bottom of the funnel, particularly in search and share of search spend, that is getting completely upended when we think about the new game of discovery from a performance perspective. So that is massively shifting out of search and then going into those Gen AI platforms. And whilst you can't spend as a brand in there to defend your keywords, that's not to say that's not going to happen. It's not that the platforms are saying it's not going to happen, but Google said it wasn't going to happen. So it will happen. But regardless of that, it's completely redefining the rules of what was search engine optimization now to Gen AI-led optimization. Firstly, to ensure that brands are discoverable at that point of trigger or at that point of research, at that point of planning for that particular category. Because if your brand isn't being keyed in as a prompt, it may or may not be discoverable, depending on what that AI is crawling. And what we're seeing increasingly is the AI algorithm pulling on recommendations and reviews as much as possible to power those brands that it does surface. And then from a publisher perspective, and we're on the receiving end of this, and this is something that as a executive leadership team, we are in conversations, I promise you, weekly about how we navigate this, because the reality is the game is changing for publishers by way of traffic, and how much traffic is actually being driven through from those Gen AI platforms. So if you think about, I mean, the stats that you've got on the right in front of you there, Google used to crawl a publisher's website 12 times for every one user that it sent through. Today, it crawls a publisher website 64 times for every one user that it sends through. And then if you put that into the context of ChatGPT crawls a website like Mamamia 1,200 times for every one user, every one item of traffic that it sends through. So for publishers, the ability to drive ultimately the currency that we trade in, which is page views or audience, that is becoming harder. That impacts publishers. It also impacts brands as well, with brands looking to obviously own a curated experience within their owned website environments as well. So generally, internet page views are back. They're back by 25% in some instances, between 1 and 25%, depending on the nature of the content that you deal in. The publishers that are hurting the most are ones that are more driven by what has happened, less driven by opinion and tone of voice and curation. So these are the three predictions around AI and how it's really changing the game over the next 12 months. So ChatGPT will become the new Google. I think we've all accepted that. We're all probably behaving in that way already. You can even have your ChatGPT take over your search engine, and so whatever you type in your search bar just goes to ChatGPT, which I did a long time ago. But with that, it means that we're going to be optimizing to agents as the gatekeepers of demand management, as opposed to search engine optimization or PPC. And with that in mind, like I said at the start, we're going to be trading in a new currency, and that currency is reviews, recommendations, and the things that's ultimately going to feed an algorithm that has an infinite amount of content to surface. What will get preferenced is a weighting towards real people, real recommendations, and peer reviews. So I mentioned this, throwing a little bit of shade, why not? I mean, look, the publishers, when I referenced that stat of 1 to 25% of page views being back, where it is hurting, like I said, it is hurting any publisher that is in the game of reporting what has happened, because now that's completely been disseminated. What has happened, as soon as that becomes bits of data, as soon as that becomes ones and zeros, that can be also pulled in to those generative AI platforms. What can't be pulled in is, like I said, opinion, tone, and a value-led overlay to that content, and a point of view around how you curate content and what you overlay around content that reports what has happened. As well, we've all done this. Brands that are purely relying, which we know is where brands have been, like I said, particularly for the last 5 or so years, probably post-COVID. If you're playing at the bottom of the funnel and you're hoping that you're going to win on keywords, or you're going to win after that category has been triggered, if you're going to be relying on being a brand that ChatGPT is going to recommend, like I did this, I was dreaming over the weekend. I said, what are the top 3 places in Bali that are family friendly and under $500 a night? It literally came back with recommendations of named resorts, and then I could go through and book those holidays as well. So we know AI is changing the game. There's a resurgence back to the top of the funnel from the bottom of the funnel. But at the same time, what we're seeing, particularly as a publisher that is connecting with audiences every single day, is how the audience landscape just continues to be redefined, and audiences are becoming that layer more discerning. If you've got infinite content and that content can be curated based on your preferences and your prompts, of course you're going to become more discerning about what content you're going to spend your time with. So you kind of see this polarity in audience behaviors, and a shift, almost like an antidote to what you can get from generative AI in broader content consumption behaviors within social and publisher platforms. So a shift from polish to authenticity, so more raw, your lo-fi, think lo-fi reels, think lo-fi video, think content that can be turned around in a second, not in months. A shift away from reality. So what we mean by that is the reality of the news cycle in particular. We know that women, Australian women, are actually the biggest avoiders of news content globally, and that skews the younger you get, the higher that news avoidance is. And we see that reflected in our own content consumption patterns from our own audience as well. So shifting away from the news cycle, which is very doom and gloom. Like I challenge you, go on any of the news heads, mastheads websites, you will find every single story being about how you're going to lose your house, what terrible weather events coming, how bad the global economy is. There'll be some kind of violence or some kind of unsettling story about your safety. It's pretty dark out there. So it is that turning towards escapism. So our entertainment ecosystem, for example, we're seeing it month on month increase in both audience penetration and time spent. As an antidote to the bad news. Let's just have some moments of joy within our days. Next one, from websites to feeds. I mean, this has been the case for some time now, and it's continuing to exacerbate in terms of behavior. You're more likely to be I relate to this, more likely to be spending time in the comment section on a feed than you are looking for information on a website. With that, and with just the sheer amount of content out there, it is being able to find whether that's social accounts that you follow, whether that's the particular publishers that are your go-to, what are they adding? What are they adding above and beyond information? And that is curation. And then lastly, this immediacy of access to content. And we see this, in even like traditional TV viewing behaviors, right? Like it's very, very rare now that even on a Netflix or Amazon, they've also moved away from holding back their seasonal drops of episodes, because people just want to binge content, and they want to be able to access that content on their terms. So you might at best now see a season get dropped in 2 parts, but very unlikely you're going to get that week to week cadence that we were trained on for so long, because those subscription services now know that if you're not satisfying the need for content in that moment, you're going to potentially risk losing that subscription to another partner, another player that is able to satisfy that need for a binge. So with all that said, you've got this shifting landscape in terms of AI, in terms of audience behaviors around content. One thing we know as content publishers, that is what we are in the business of Mamamia, it has never been more important to be producing relevant content that hits these 3 rules. So culture, connection, and community is the formula for relevance. I wouldn't say that's new news. I think that's long been held, in various shapes, maybe different words. Marketing, I don't think, would contest this too much, but what we know to be true is the way in which each of these rules can be played for. So the tactics used to deliver and win relevance within them has changed and is continuing to change. So culture is all about how you ride the zeitgeist, pierce that cultural conversation, make a brand famous through fame up, so being talked about on your behalf by being relevant to the topics that are trending within culture. Typically for a brand, that's through some kind of meaningful provocation or action-led initiative that gets people talking. Connection is obviously how you connect one-on-one with an individual, so turning them from a passive moment of consumption into an active moment of engagement and getting them to think, feel, or do something through that connection. And then community, which I think is the hardest one for any brand to get right, is how you're able to foster a shared experience, physically or digitally, with your audience, and enabling them to connect with each other, with there being a meaningful role played by your brand as well. So if you can do all those things, or you can, do a lot of those things, you are getting closer to being able to create content as a brand that is relevant. And then what we've done, which you would have seen if I just go back, we've actually created a rule book for relevance, which anyone who came to the Mamamia upfronts may have got their hands on. We do have a lot more if you still want to get your hands on one. But what we've done is we've then broken down each of those rules for relevance into very specific tactics. So those tactics are the ones that are really codified for our audience as to how we can get disproportionate levels of engagement and time spent. And we apply these day in and day out. So we've really, really refined these as being those tactics that we know can deliver to each of these rules today. So lots more. I could probably spend 10 minutes on this slide, but we'll move on because I've made the point. We've got the desire, or the requirement, I should say, for brands to be more relevant in order to cut through within this changing landscape of AI and audience behavior. Plus, what AI is also doing is it's creating a content reality that is infinite. So AI is now being detected in 75% of new websites that are being created. It is rapidly being adopted to the vast amount of content that is starting to be created. And you'd be seeing this with your brands that you're working with and how they're looking or are already adopting it to their creative asset development. So 90% of online content is predicted to be AI generated in the next 18 months, which I find freaking terrifying. So that is the landscape of advertising, and you think about, to what degree is that useful from an efficiency perspective and a scale perspective, certainly from a personalization perspective, which lends itself to effectiveness. But at what point do you start to lose the human connection within that content that's being created? And at what point is the audience on the receiving end of that content aware that AI is being deployed? But on, I guess, even more human note, what the reality is for brands is you're competing against content like this. It's just rabbits jumping on a trampoline. That video alone, I think it got over 7 million views in I think it was 24 hours. And it went viral just because everybody fell for it. So it was, I'll play it again. It was deliberately made to look like it was a CCTV. And so people thought that rabbits were just jumping on this person's trampoline. And I would buy that and I would share that. But I think the point I'm making here is that is the type of content that audiences are willingly consuming. We, on behalf of the brands that we represent, that's what we're competing with. Things like that do get your attention, that do have some social currency. We need to be finding ways that we can cut through. And something like that, which is just a simple example, you start to lose that perspective on reality. And I think in a world where, information is infinite, it can be curated to your personal prompts and preferences like that. The only thing that is real in terms of the currency that can pull things apart is trust. So we have the formula for trust that I've talked about: culture, connection, community. But what is the denominator? I think that's the right word, denominator. It can either make it stronger, like your relevance can be stronger, or it can be completely eroded and depleted if you do not have audience trust. So the analogy that I use is relevance is the thing that gets the door open, but it's trust that gets you invited in to stay. And I think there's no more truth to that than in the media landscape that we're operating in and we're going to continue to operate in. Trust is what is going to be the defining factor that's going to pull apart what is credible, what actually generates connection, in turn attention and outcomes, and also what is going to predispose discovery for brands. So if I just click on that a little bit more, and I don't know if anyone knows what this image is, it's not immediately obvious, but the reality with everything that is changing, there's a lot that doesn't change. What doesn't change is the millions and billions of years that we have evolved as humans to take social signals and to trust. We are innately wired to trust other people. And this example here is actually, it's an aerial view. I think it's in Manchester in the UK. And it's an aerial view of all the X's are the houses that have air conditioning units. So at the time when air conditioning was That doesn't feel right that would be Manchester, does it? No one needs air conditioning in Manchester. Let's assume it's somewhere else. But you would be looking and going, look, you can clearly see the impact of humans telling other humans that they need air conditioning. Probably not if they live in Manchester, just in terms of the proximity of where those units have been installed. So we know this is true. People trust people. But what does that mean for today and how brands are looking to leverage that advantage? So trust is a uniquely human experience. As much as we talk about brand trust, the reality is when we're looking to instill a brand with trust, we are leveraging distinctly human levers, and we're looking to adopt those and kind of infer them onto a brand. But what trust actually runs on is a human chemical. So I don't know if anyone's heard of oxytocin. It's sometimes also referred to as the love hormone or the love chemical. It's also the trust chemical. It's what makes us humans. Animals have it too. But when you are in proximity to somebody that you trust or that you love, you emit oxytocin. So when new mums have babies, one of the reasons why they can get by, they wouldn't like it, probably not still, there's not that it's not still hard. So when new mums have babies, they can get by with a lot less sleep, and still sure they would wish they had more sleep. However, it's because of oxytocin. So oxytocin is emitted because of that bonding is so strong with the baby, and that is the love hormone, and that is exactly, you get a microdose of that every time you're in an encounter with somebody that you feel a sense of connection and trust for. And you can't emulate that by ChatGPT or AI. It is only something that can come from a human to human connection. So trust is formed in two ways. This hasn't changed and it's not going to change. We trust as a human, we get that hit of oxytocin because of either we are having a direct experience with a particular product, service, brand, person. We know it to be true because we have first-hand experience with that thing, or it is the inferred experience that we're getting from the tribe. So that is the shared signals that come through other people. And each of these can be broken down into principles of how do you drive direct experience through consistency, transparency, authenticity, and resonance. And then also, how can we leverage collective experience as a brand? And I think this is the part that's most interesting to this particular narrative, around how, yes, word of mouth, we know that's important, communities, but cultural familiarity as well as the consistency of your reputation over time, all levers that help leverage those shared signals of people trusting other people. And the reality is, like, yes, with the aerial view of the air conditioning units, that was bound by physical proximity, family, friends, neighbours on a physical scale. We know that there is no physical barrier now to the degree to which this collective experience building trust is bound. So we're seeing this play out. Influencers, we know the influencer market is massive and it's only going to continue to grow because it leverages collective experience and because that is so powerful for brands. We see it as Mamamia. We see the audience data that tells us the propensity for people to be looking for products, services, and recommendations within social, leaning into influencers, but also now just that shifting of behavior and just how powerful it is as a driver of both purchase and trust. So this idea of parasocial relationships is at the forefront of collective experience today. So I don't think there's a day that goes by at Mamamia that I don't say parasocial. But just in case nobody else is saying parasocial daily, this is the definition. So parasocial is a connection that someone feels between themselves and a person that they don't know. It's a relationship characterized by a one-sided feeling of intimacy, where a person develops a sense of knowing and loyalty towards this public figure. So it can even play out for artificial intelligence. I think we've all heard those stories. I don't know how much truth there is to them, but there is some data that I've seen as part of researching this presentation. I think it was like something wild, like 2% of people say that they've got a romantic relationship with their Gen AI. I'm not sure about that, but it's probably not something you would say if it was true. But there's this idea of parasocial relationships as a really, really strong sense of intimacy that you have with somebody or a Gen AI, but they don't have that back. It's one-sided. So it is exactly how you would be feeling towards, potentially a podcast host that you're listening to day in and day out, as much as it might be for an influencer that you follow and see their content multiple times a day, or your ChatGPT. So parasocial is actually the Cambridge Dictionary's word of the year. And I don't think there's any surprise just with how endemic it is across culture. So with parasocial, the thing that really defines it is authenticity. That's what is pulling parasocial relationships apart from the relationships that defined culture, 5, 10, 20 years ago, in terms of like that kind of A-list celebrity culture that was. The difference in why parasocial is this kind of trending thought is because it has authenticity as, I guess, at its core. So these are the 7 markers of authenticity that have been defined by a sociologist. So you've got ordinary, and when I talk through these, you think about how relevant they are to both influencers, but also to podcast hosts. So ordinariness, I didn't know that was a word, which is talking about everyday life annoyances, making you feel like you're one of them and removing the polish. Immediacy, so it is that sense of now and not having to wait for a production cycle for something to hit content. Similarity is that perceived sense of likeness and relatability. Freedom is this sense of being unfiltered and that there isn't constraints placed on that individual in terms of their thoughts, their feelings, and their opinions that are being shared. It doesn't feel produced. Spontaneity is, I guess, similar to that, but this idea of feeling like it's off the cuff, and it's not in any way manufactured. It's real. Imperfection, I think this is, not having individuals that are polished, that have been deeply kind of that are masked in any way or are putting on a performance. Again, it's that sense of realness. And then lastly, I quite like this one, is confessions. So this sense that individual is actually sharing their vulnerabilities and their secrets the way you would a friend. So I think if you think about your family or your friends, you could say that you have, hopefully most of these, but typically this wasn't something that you would have necessarily said were traits of how you felt about, I don't know, Justin Bieber or whoever it was that you liked 10, 20 years ago. Maybe Justin Bieber wasn't even born then. So we see this evolution of parasocial relationships from the 2000s, which was this A-list era. So it was your musicians, your Britney Spears, it was your athletes, it was your actors and your actresses, but there was that real sense of distance between you as an individual and them, and it was heavily managed in terms of what content or how they presented themselves. And then as you progress over time from left to right here, the level of intimacy is increasing, but also that authenticity that I just spoke about. So you go from the A-list era into the rise of relatability, which was basically that boom that happened between the early 2000s and in some ways continues today, right, around reality. And it sort of started with celebrity reality, like all of those, Simple Life and all of that, moving into more real people, relatable people and their realities, turning them in turn into celebrities. And influencers, which was the next phase, influencer revolution, but still a level of curation, still potentially a lack of authenticity, not as much authenticity as what you can then see in terms of the level of authenticity that I was mentioning about, in particular podcast hosts or vodcast hosts. So the power of parasocial is why podcast hosts do deliver the unrivaled levels of trust that we see. And I think this is one of my favorite stats in this presentation. You see that 59% of Australians say that they trust influencer sponsored posts more than they do A-list celebrities. Cool. But what is also really fascinating is now more so 63% of Australians trust their favorite podcaster host more than their favorite influencer. So this is where you're kind of seeing that baton pass in terms of, as you get closer to the strength of the parasocial relationship and the authenticity that is characteristic of that parasocial relationship, the more trust you get. And of course, that trust is then very powerful for brands. So we've got 45% of Gen Z and millennials saying that they trust the brand being promoted because of the relationship that they have with their podcast hosts that they listen to, as well as 75% saying that they trust the podcast hosts. I think importantly, like lovely, but what does that mean for brands? It means more outcomes. So it means dollar for dollar, what you're getting in terms of the, not just reach, but the attention, and then the conversion of that attention into brand outcomes, be that action, purchase, and ROI, are comparably stronger. So attention, we've got an index of 1.22, so 22% more likely to for audiences to listen to all of the ads in a podcast. The next channel down in terms of rankings of all the channels, so social was in there, YouTube was in there, TV was in there, BVOD was in there. Attention paid to podcast advertising, listening to all of the ads was the highest, and the next one down was radio. And so 22% more likely to listen to all the podcast ads, even just compared to radio. Action, so nearly 2/3 of Australians say they take action after hearing an ad, but importantly, that translates into purchase. So this is powerful, right? So not all podcasting advertising is created equal. So you can have more streaming-led solutions, or even potentially programmatic solutions, or I think some pod networks would just have client creatives. So they're not using the hosts for that particular episode or show to voice those ads. That isn't going to deliver the same level of potency. You can see here that play out for purchase as it is if it is the host voicing that ad, because of exactly what I'm talking about. So 33% more likely to result in a higher rate of purchasing if you are using a host-led ad within that show than if you're not. And then ROI. So this is what we all want to see. 3 times the ROI if you are using a host-led ad within a podcasting environment than just a clean voice or a regular client creative. And that's just all within podcasting, which we know is a disproportionately powerful medium. So we've gone through the importance of humanity, we've gone through parasocial, and now why is Mamamia so great at doing that? Because of course they are. Of course that is the answer that you have been waiting for. How do you do this? Well, what we do at Mamamia is inherently parasocial. You know, all of the content that we create is about leveraging, whether that's our team or our talent, our editors and our writers. So that is our edge. So we are not journalists, proudly so. We are not, the ABC going out and reporting on what's going on in the world, but we are making sure that everything we deliver to our audiences is packaged in an opinion and a layer of help, humor and heart. And that is because of the perspectives of the people that our audience come to trust, because of the consistency and the authenticity through which they do that. And that translates to purchase for brands. And I think that's the important piece here. Is on the left, you've got Lee, who is the face of Nothing to Wear and You Beauty. None of this is branded content. This is all organic, but it makes the point, right? If in terms of the power of parasocial relationships. So she put up a concealer. It got a 44% click through through skim links, and then that click through had a 12% conversion, which is pretty unheard of. These two, so one of them is the host of Parenting Out Loud and the other's a social media producer. They both wore the same, it was like a trending lioness shirt before it was sort of trending. They both wore the same thing to work, just created a really lo-fi reel, chucked it up on Instagram, and it had links, again, and it went on, as an article, had skim links embedded. It sold 180 units in 24 hours. And then lastly, Annalise is also one of our hosts and writers. She wore the same pair of shoes to work every single day for a month and no one noticed. So she wrote an article about it. That article had a link, and then that sold 44 units, and that's not 44%, 44 units in 24 hours. And so we pride ourselves on this. It's why we see the levels of trust that we do. I won't bang on about this too much, but it is the currency that we trade in. So more than reach, it's about the potency of our audience. And what we did is we worked with amplified intelligence and made sure that, it's one thing for your audience to tell you that you're great, but how do we stack up against the general population, and how do we stack up against the industry more broadly, in terms of industry benchmarks for the particular touch points that we trade in. So what you can see here, luckily pretty well. So here's just a snapshot of these results. We only got these results 2 weeks ago, so this is hot off the press. So when you look at social, you look at, in this instance, we're looking at Instagram, but we also looked at TikTok. We looked at our vodcasts, which had never been done before, vodcasting on YouTube distribution, and we also looked at podcasts. But for Instagram, you can see that our active attention seconds are 5 times higher than the industry benchmark, industry norms. So you've got, of a Mamamia ad, 15 seconds of attention, which is extremely high when you think about the behaviors that we all do within social, where you're just like scrolling as fast as you can for a hit of dopamine. It's very rare to watch something for 15 consecutive, seconds. The other thing is the ad length. So when you are leveraging parasocial relationships, your content is being consumed like entertaining content, not like advertising. And for that reason, you can have longer ad lengths. So in social, typical ad length is 6 to 15 seconds. The average ad length that was tested in this piece of research was actually 1 minute and 12 seconds. And then when you normalize for ad length, so if you put Mamamia ad lengths to an equivalent of 30 seconds and the industry norms to an equivalent ad length for 30 seconds, you can see the disparity between the propensity for an audience to pay attention. So 27% of that advertising content has active attention paid to it from a Mamamia perspective. For the rest of the industry benchmarks, the averages you're going to see is less than 6% of that ad content getting any attention. So we're pretty proud of that, and the explanation for it is parasocial relationships and the fact, people trust people. Our audience, we see just how engaged they are by the happenings of what's going on at Mamamia, but also getting that voyeuristic look, particularly in social, of what is going on within the 4 walls of Mamamia HQ, but also for our hosts and our talent. And what you can see here is just the decay of attention. So standard ads on Instagram decay 1.7 times faster than they do on Mamamia, which is the black line. So if you can capture attention, that's one thing. Typically it falls off a cliff, like you can see for that purple line. But if you're leveraging parasocial relationships, and you can do that anywhere else, doesn't have to be on Mamamia, you can not just capture that attention, you can sustain that attention, and of course turn that attention into disproportionate outcomes because of trust. And similarly for TikTok there as well. And then that attention translates into short and long outcomes. So I'm not going to labor on this one, but across all those touch points, your podcast, you've got YouTube there in the middle, and then you've got an average for the 2 social platforms. The point I want to make here is that leveraging parasocial relationships impacts both the short and the long. So you've got short-term ad strength and the uplifts of exposed versus non-exposed, and then same for mental availability. So extremely powerful. And then just lastly, putting that all into context with a case study, and something I don't think you'd necessarily think of Mamamia for, which is the auto category, and where something like the power of parasocial can be so compelling, where you're not going to show up in the same way as you would for the the polished TVC for cars and Skoda would look one way, and there's restrictions and they all kind of look great, but there's a certain mold. When you're able to play in the social space and the parasocial space, the way that you can show up is going to be, it's going to be a lot more raw. But what the hosts did, this is the hosts of Mamamia Out Loud, they all got given a Skoda and they got to basically try it for a week. And then they were able to point out all the little things that you're not going to see in the TVC. Like the fact there was an umbrella holder, that you could always have an umbrella in the driver's seat. And just some of those like cheeky things of where you hang your dry cleaning, and, you know, also giving the audiences something that they actually wanted to spend time with, because it showed them a little bit about the lives of our hosts. So yeah, you can have a look at the results there for yourself. But I think just a good example of how this could come to life in both written and social video. And that is me at time with like 30 seconds to spare. But hopefully that was helpful to everybody. And if there's anything that you want to see a little bit more on in any of this, please do reach out to any of your contacts. So either myself, Belle Cook, who's the head of audio, Lene, who looks after all of New South Wales, Indian agency, or of course the lovely Kate, who is on the call as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys. Always super interesting. I couldn't agree more about some of those points, Danny, about trust and where that's going down the gurgler in the next couple of years with AI and what's happening with that. So super interesting. Guys, if anyone wants to get in contact with them, we can connect them. They're also in the rep directory as well. Thank you, guys, for your time. Thank you for your ongoing support of the independent sector. It's much appreciated. Mamamia are great partners of Indie. So thanks, guys. Have a great day and talk to everyone soon. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.